love that song. I love feeling that spirit moving in me. And as we move into August, this month of Will, Reverend Maggie and I are still opening ourselves to the wisdom in our book study, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Now we're getting close to the end of this. We still have 2 more weeks, but here we wanted to focus on our title, Navigating the Racial Divide. Now this is certainly something that's important in our time. We're in a time where so much is happening. If we're watching the news or reading the newspaper or just listening to our heart, we know that there's a lot going on.
And I'm really grateful that we've taken the time on the calendar to navigate the racial divide thoroughly and slowly. And I'm really grateful we brought this up in our book study just this week, how we started with the need to observe self-care in the Sabbath, because this has been big doses, absorb. Big doses, absorb. And especially as we've gotten to the latter half of the book, we just have a few more weeks where the concentration of reflection has come inward, where we're touching our tender spots, where we really need to utilize our spiritual tools to make it through. We've talked about wanting to throw this book across the room. I have accidentally left it when I've needed to be reading, but really it's because it's that time in that space to do that inner reflection. So building on what we talked about last week and closing the gap of our self-awareness and that racial divide, we just keep on moving, just one step, one foot in front of the other, step by step, bit by bit. And I want to remind you of what we talked about last week in the reflection and the projection, because that's a lot of what we continue to focus on this week. So Robin DiAngelo just starts us right out of the gate. She says that one way that whites protect their position when challenged on race is to invoke the discourse of self-defense. So remembering what we talked about last week is that all of the inner stuff, all of our unhealed junk is what we immediately throw out in a conversation. When it's something uncomfortable, when it's something that we feel that we don't have the tools to talk about, or we haven't taken the time to do that inner inquiry, that investigation, and somebody out of left field will inevitably drop it in our lap, because that's how the universe works. Things that are ours to do and heal and look at are what are gifted to us. It may not feel like a gift, but it's gifted to us to do that inner work. So when she talks about how white people protect their positions when challenged on race, the self-defense, and we've talked about this in great detail, the self-defense looks a lot like an action on my behalf that is aimed at manipulating the outcome of that conversation. And because we as white people are uncomfortable with race, we don't have the vocabulary, we don't have the understanding or the education, it feels uncomfortable. And the very first thing we do is drop or throw out an emotional reaction. Tears, anger, short, defensive quips of, like just back up. And it could also look like, I'm just not going to have any part of this. I'm going to leave the room now and leave whoever is left to have this conversation without me. And in talking about that, it immediately disrupts the flow of conversation, of connection, and understanding. Because what happens where a very important topic may be being broached bravely and openly, when we throw out our garbage, everybody starts rummaging through the garbage instead of the topic at hand. So that's a very valuable place for us to be recognizing our position, our inner works. Even saying something like, I don't know how to talk about this, and I feel raw and vulnerable around it, is a much better way to navigate the racial divide than to throw out self-defense and deter the conversation from even happening in the first place.
Absolutely spot on. And I think Robin, the author of this book, goes to great lengths to explain why that is. Because we have such a negative perspective of racism. Racism's a bad word in our vocabulary, where culturally it's made to be a bad word. When race is really how we're brought up.
Right.
What cultural influences create the way we celebrate holidays, or what we wear, or what ceremonies we honor, and what did our ancestors celebrate and honor. That's our race. And as Robin continues to bring her wisdom and her experience in working with white people in this, we as white people don't have a white identity. We don't think about being white. You know, when we fill out the little, what are you? We'll check off white or Caucasian, but we don't have a sense identity to it. And in reality, that's how all people are. Because in truth, if someone's a black woman and a professor, she's not a black woman who's a professor, she's a woman who's a professor who happens to be black. Just like I'm a minister and I'm a man and I happen to be white. But we as white, in our white fragility, maintaining a little control. Maintaining
Martha Creek would say,
power.
drop the little. Maintaining power.
Having our sense of right and righteousness means we don't talk about racism. And when race issues come up, we instantly deflect. There's a defense that comes up. Now, I want to bring in this quote from Viktor Frankl. Now, Viktor Frankl's great author. He was a survivor of the Holocaust. Now, if there's anyone who could pull the victim card, this is a man who survived because he knew he had value. And he says here, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, this is pretty darn powerful.
Yeah.
Because if what's given is that socially, culturally, it's difficult for white people to discuss racism, to discuss my own personal racial influences, beliefs, ideas. The way we navigate the racial divide is we come into an ability to talk about it. Come into an opportunity where we know in unity we're all one, but bringing that into a practical relation with the people around us. And having conversations that are real and not basing anything of what we say on a belief, but on what is. And whatever there is, whenever there's a reaction, whenever there's a stimulus, whenever there's engagement, there is a pause, there's a space. And in that space, we get to choose. We can step out in righteousness, in our will and create the very same divide that already exists. Just pour kerosene on the fire.
Mm-hmm.
But if we bring our spiritual understanding, our willingness to say, as you say, I don't know, or I don't know how to talk about this, there's an opportunity for us to grow. And in that growth, we arrive at our freedom.
Right. It takes a willingness to not only do the self-inquiry and develop a really rich understanding of self, so deep self-awareness. It also takes a willingness to be vulnerable. In our vulnerability and our authenticity, we're able to connect with people who we would otherwise shut down or shut out of our lives. And I have to think about this is, an example that isn't necessarily racially charged, but how I was relating to my now 19-year-old daughter is that girl pushed every button I had, everything that challenged me as a female, as a mother, as a wife, as a professional. And because the universe brings to us these little gifts to look at, I had to stop pounding against these triggering moments and realize, holy moly, I am really mad about this. And it's not her words or her actions per se. It's something in here that makes me feel like I have to react, that I have to defend myself as a mom, that I have to defend my choices as a woman, that I must. And the same thing is really involved in understanding the racial divide. Because when I could stop meeting her actions, her words, her choices, and recognize where the opportunity of growth, of healing was within me, then of course I had to do that inner work. It's easier to point at a teenager especially than it is to stop and go, why? Why do I feel like I need to defend this? Why do I need to rant and rave and holler and, wail about? When I stopped reacting, when I stopped saying, I don't have the answers. I don't know how to fix this for you. And gee, maybe I don't need to fix this for you because as you've put in my face 97 times today, you're a grown-up. And so it's my job shifted from being a catalyst of resistance for her to being a catalyst of acceptance, to really holding that space and admitting when I was wrong and knowing that I don't know all the answers. And in doing that and creating that vulnerability and doing the searching and being like, I don't know why I got this idea I had to be perfect all the time, and letting that go, we then became connected on a deeper level. We became friends. We gained an understanding and acceptance of each other, not taking responsibility for one another, but accepting one another. And I think that that's the greatest possibility. I think that's what I would like to see as the possibility in navigating the racial divide, is people just saying, I'm really ashamed about this. I really screwed up. Or I really don't know what to say, but I don't want to act like an idiot and run out of the room and take all of the emotional storm with me. I just want to say I'm uncomfortable and I don't know what to do and I don't know why I even think the way I do, but would you be willing to have a conversation with me? Would you be willing to tell me about yourself so that I can develop acceptance through understanding and lay aside collectively judgment, which is what Myrtle Fillmore was talking about last week, and replacing an old habit, replacing an old instance with something better, more mature, more elevated, a demonstration of self-awareness that people can react to on a respected level. And that's where we're heading. That's what we are crying out for right
Yes.
now. But before she turns us loose, Robin DiAngelo says white fragility functions as a form of bullying. And I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. White fragility functions as a form of bullying. And I did leave my book at home, but she goes on with this context to say, I am going to make it so miserable for you to confront me, no matter how diplomatically you try to do so, that you will simply back off, give up, and never bring up the issue again. And we've all experienced this. We've all experienced this in a racial circumstance, in our family of origin, in our work life, whatever. When you get met with such hostility, hostile resistance, it turns my discomfort, here's what we talked about last week and we're talking about again, I'm uncomfortable, but instead of saying, I'm uncomfortable, I take it from inside and I project it onto you. And now, how dare you bring this up? I don't want to talk to you. I'm trying to do my job. I'm just living my best life here. And the emotional response is not lost. It is a feeling. It is like, oh, okay, so this topic is off limits with you. And that is especially true with racism, with just talking about race. I don't know about you. I'm curious. I want to know culture. I want to know story. I want to know experiences and backgrounds, but that's the place where I am today. I can't say, in all honesty, that I haven't thrown up all kinds of garbage for you to have to weed through and been that person that bullied by making you feel small, making you feel wrong, and cutting off access to me and my superiority. You now know not to, do not, absolutely not approach me under any circumstances with this conversation again. And that's where we cannot be.
Yes. And you know what this reminds me of? Is the playground.
Oh, yeah.
Between classes. Mm-hmm. Or recess time.
Mm-hmm.
Out on the playing field, rather than respond to something, the reaction is just an overblown, just back off, buddy. Mm-hmm. And none of us want to be a bully. Mm-hmm. But one thing that Robin states in the book is there's an unspoken cardinal rule. Absolutely do not, under any circumstances, talk about racism. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have the audacity to cross that line, break the cardinal rule, then we have the collective white supremacy has the belief that they have the authority to cut down just with anger, with projection, with very strong, actually turning it around, and it's their fault. Because I'm not racist, it's their fault. Why are you being racist? Mm-hmm. And this, it's twisted, but isn't it what we've done as kids? And we've internalized that journey, and we haven't resolved the differences from ourselves. And it's time we address those people around us, because they're no less a beautiful child of God than I am. Mm-hmm. And we know that as we discuss this, we are looking at this on Sunday as a spiritual principle. This is valuable to us because we know that as we live and move and have our being, what we believe and what we say create our experience. And our fifth principle of taking action, of being the principles that we hold true, then we're in right alignment. And that will help us navigate the racial divide so that we can build bridges. We can have an opportunity to open discourse and go, wow, I had no idea your experience of this is different from mine. When we're doing the Wednesday night with Dr. Phyllis Burgess, I went to unlock the door, and there were two policemen in our parking lot. And I have, the policemen are often in our parking lot. They're talking, they're taking their coffee hour. I don't know what they do, but when I look at it, just like, you be here all the time. I just love it. Well, Phyllis stepped in the door and she said, oh, every time I see policemen out there, it unnerves me. And my immediate response was, oh, they're always here. I love that they're here. I discounted what she had just shared with me as a teaching moment for me. When she reflected that back to me, I was able to just listen and hear it and see that her experience of that scenario is different from mine and no less valuable. But the fact that fear came up for her is addressing how different our experience is as white people and people of color in our own community. And we learn so much by being willing to talk about it and reflect that we're not going to have the same experiences.
Right.
But we take value in coming closer together by understanding each other. Because we didn't grow up in the same house. We didn't grow up in the same county. We didn't grow up in the same nation even. We're all enculturated by our race.
Right.
And as we own and accept that, we are drawing a much less divide between races.
I think about bullies too, how we align ourselves. I love the visual of the playground because we want to naturally insulate ourselves from conflict. So if the bully has got the run of the playground, we naturally align ourselves. This isn't necessarily racially driven, but if there's a bully, we align behind the bully because we don't want the sights set on us. It feels horrible. It feels horrible to be targeted as somebody who's being bullied. But listening to you, Gary, I thought about how the old you spot it, you got it kind of thing, right? So if we can, just for a second, think about where we have acted in an attempt to control someone else's behavior and accept that. We do it. I do it. Do you do it? Human. So we do it when we can accept that and take the time to look at instances and process that emotion and forgiveness around it. Then we are able to see it when it's in play in our environment around us. And the trick then becomes to see it and speak up. See something, say something. If when you've recognized your attempt to be a bully and your attempt to control an outcome in public or in private, then when you have done the work, you will see it being exercised in others. And I feel strong enough to say, that's not okay. We don't talk like that to people here. You were in line first. Whatever it is, you are in line first. You are a human being. You are perfect in the eyes of God. I don't care what color your skin color is. We all treat each other equally when I'm here. And the attempt of us addressing this in a long summer series and going through the work of this book is to be multiple conduits of that's not okay here, of being multiple conduits and advocates and brave, house-cleaned individuals that take that in multiplicity out into the world around us. Because when you speak up and I speak up, someone is inevitably watching and going, oh, well, then it's okay to speak up. So then they'll speak up. And the next time they do, someone is watching. You get the gist, right? It's got to catch fire, a positive way of moving truth out into the world. And I said yes, and you said yes. And we're glad you're tuning in today because we know you're saying yes too.
Yes. And we conclude our talk with the great wisdom of Maya Angelou. And this is powerful. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But they will never forget how you made them feel. This says so much in it. It really is a testimony to how we come together. And in this bizarre time of COVID and distancing and racial issues are coming to have us see. How do I feel when I'm with you? Mm-hmm. How does this situation have me walk away feeling? If I walk away feeling grateful and loving, then I've had a very positive experience. But what if I've had a stimulus where I have reacted and initially I'm incensed? How dare you say that to me? Mm-hmm. And I'm able to drop my defense. And I'm able to say, wow, could you say that again? Because I'd like to be able to hear it. I want to understand it. And wouldn't that, my willingness to explore, have an effect on how that person's willing to be with me? Because if I just throw up all of my defenses, I'm not going to leave anyone with a feeling of quietness, of peace, because I've completely deflected it. It's a good gauge for us to know how are we feeling and seeing what effect we have on others.
Kindness goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Kindness goes a very long way. And details really do become fuzzy. You know, I was the only white kid in an all-black school my freshman year of high school in inner city DC. And I was terrified. I didn't know what the energy that was coming at me was for because I was uneducated and unfamiliar with the racial divide. And I had one teacher, my calligraphy teacher, Mr. Giles, invite me to eat lunch in the art room so I wasn't eating lunch by myself. And that same calligraphy teacher saw me haul and tail across the softball field being chased and said, "You're really fast. I think you should join the track team." And instead of being someone else that I was afraid of or someone else that I couldn't go to, he started to create a safe place for me, regardless of my color, regardless of my education or exposure. I was a 13-year-old girl from El Paso, Texas, didn't have a lot of racial familiarity. But by inviting me to eat lunch there, other kids had lunch there. And I came to understand that he invited his track team to eat lunch in the art room. And I was being brought in to the track team before I even ran my first 100 meters. What does this have to do with this? What does it have to do with race or forgiveness? I don't remember what I ate for lunch in that room. I don't remember if it was hot or cold the day that I was bolting across the softball field trying to catch the train. But I know that I had a place of safety. I know that I had a place of belonging. I know that He created an opportunity for me to make other friends and not be outcasted. And in that, it was the greatest gift I have maybe ever received, besides children, that I got an understanding. I got connection. I got invited to Kwanzaa. I got invited to Sunday dinners. I had Camilla Wheeler's daddy jump up in the stands when I was taking the first 100 yards, and I was being teased that white girls can't run, and he jumped up on my behalf and said, y'all need to da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Sit your butt down. I belonged, and that's a feeling that I lean on and I take very seriously in being someone that is willing and aware and able to extend that feeling to someone else. Every single day, color, gender, age does not matter, because I felt protected, I felt seen, I felt belonged. I want to give that gift to anyone else that I possibly can in the world. And it is so healing in navigating the racial divide.
It sure is, and a great use of our divine will to make a directing force to walk the walk and practice what we practice spiritually, and giving the gift of respect and love to others.
Step out on the water, release your faith. Every step is stronger. Step out on the water.